Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you and welcome to Islam and Life with me, Tariq Ramadan, broadcasting from London. In today's show, we ask the question, what can be learned from Islamic ethics in the contemporary world?
The West has lost its moral credibility more than ever. NATO and the US Army's atrocities around the world and hypocrisy of Western politicians are among the roots of this moral collapse. Extensive use of drones controlled from thousands of miles away eliminates any sense of empathy and guilt that a soldier should feel in killing civilians. Unlawful detentions in Guantanamo Bay's notorious camp and extraordinary renditions have specifically tarnished the United States' image. So-called Western open societies are increasingly losing their openness and freedom in the name of security and the war on terror. While the United States supported dictators such as Mubarak in Egypt until the very last moment, the recent democratic movements in the Arab and Islamic world suggest new hopes. This episode of Islam and Life will ask, what can be learned from Islamic ethics in the contemporary world?
People in the streets in Egypt, in Tunisia, around the Middle East, from what we have been witnessing in other countries, were asking for freedom, dignity, no corruption, no dictatorship. They were asking for a way of dealing with the government, of dealing with the societies in a way which has to do with ethical ground and ethical objectives. And yet, what we have seen coming from the West, as well as it was coming from Muslim-majority countries, is politics without ethics, politics without dignity, and sometimes forgetting the basic human rights. And when it comes to the Islamic reference, and in the Middle East, in North Africa, we were dealing with Muslim-majority countries. Islam is very strong, and the Islamic message is very strong about values, ethics, objectives that has to be respected when it comes to human dignity, when it comes to human rights, when it comes to freedom, and when it comes to justice within the society. And all this seem to be today scattered, forgotten, for the sake of power, for the sake of exploitation, for the sake of still a kind of geostrategic interest and economic interest, forgetting human dignity. What Islam and what the Muslims can bring within the discussion, and in which way ethics is something which is universal. It has to do with the way the West is dealing with governance, is the way the Muslims should come back to themselves and be self-critical, in the way sometimes they refer to the Islamic reference and they forget the reference when it comes to implementing them in their society. So it's a common challenge, a universal challenge, and this is where we need to tackle these sensitive questions from an ethical reference dealing with the contemporary world. These questions are quite critical, and to answer all of them, I'm joined by Professor Jasser Aouda, Associate Professor and Deputy Director of the Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics at Qatar Foundation. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Jasser. And you have been writing on ethical issues. You are a reference in anything which has to do with al-maqasid, which is the objectives and the higher objective in Islam. And then we are dealing today, you are coming from Egypt, you have been dealing with everything which was happening over the last few months about people resisting dictatorship under Mubarak, but also connected to what happened in Tunisia. If we start with this very specific field, it has to do with power, politics, and people, population, and asking for dignity and freedom. How would you define the ethical reference? What is ethics when it comes to politics?
Well, alaikum salam wa rahmatullah first. What is ethics when it comes to politics? There is a theoretical answer for that, and there is an answer that is on the ground happening practically. Politicians in the East and the West, they laugh at you when you talk about ethics. They don't think that ethics could be ground for politics. Whether non-Muslim, as the report had shown, or Muslims everywhere, unfortunately. People on the streets were, as you said, were asking for a change of that. They were asking for dignity, karama. They wanted the dignity to be the basis for dealing with them locally, to be the basis of international relations, not, as you saw in the report, oil and use of force for what people think is the benefits and the welfare of the nations, and all of these narrow ways of looking at humanity. People were asking for dignity. Islam, as the reference of these people in Egypt and in the Muslim world in general, is a dignity-based ethical system. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We gave the children of Adam dignity. And that is the basis of human rights in Islam, as it is in other systems of human rights. Dignity is number one article. That dignity involves a number of maqasid. The Arabic maqasid is English for purposes, objectives, higher ends of the Islamic law, and Islam in general. The higher maqasid are the preservation of people's faith, people's life, everything's life, not just humans, people's dignity, people's families, people's wealth that they earn in lawful means. The preservation of all of this comprises what's called in fiqh al-huquq al-asasiyya or huquq al-adamiyyin, the basic rights, the human rights in Islam. And once you have all of this guaranteed as a minimum for people, their right for life, their right for dignity, their right for opinion, then you have equality, you have justice. And justice is the basis of the Islamic law.
So this is the theoretical framework, and this is quite important, because when it comes to our discussion with people of other faiths, with other religions, and people who have no religion but they are referring to a philosophical tradition, they can be atheist and agnostic, we come to these common principles and values, and you say, yes, we have shared universal values when it comes to dignity, as you were saying, and justice. Still, now, when we look at what was happening over the last year in the Middle East, it was quite clear that between our values and what is happening on the ground, there is a gap. And at the same time, no one can deny the fact that coming from the West, we have exactly the same problem. The problem is that we are talking about democracy, we are talking about freedom, and at the end, the way the people are treated, it could be immigrants, it could be people who are in prison, it could be, torture is coming back, extraordinary rendition is here, even in our country, here in European countries, this was the situation. So how can we tackle this? And how can we, because to sit here and to say, oh, this is all hypocrisy, that's fine. Okay, if we want to change, as the people in the streets in Egypt wanted to change, they are asking what? At the end of the day, they are asking for more consistency. So how can we tackle this from where you are, coming from the theoretical framework to the practical implementation? What could be the step, and especially when it comes to politics and when it comes to governance?
I think the first step is for the people to take matters in their hands. Because politicians controlling the means of violence in our societies all over, whether Western or Eastern societies, they don't think that they have any obligation to change their ways of doing politics. So I think we have to start to support the new player in the Middle East politics and international politics, which is people, الشعب. الشعب يريد, people want. Before, الشعب was not part of the equation. And therefore they could be ignored. You kill 1% of them and the 99% will go away, as people are doing, are suffering in Syria and Libya and wherever, Bahrain, you name it, and all over the Middle East. It is easy to kill a few people and the rest will be scared. But we need to support the Sha'b. To support the Sha'b, I think we need to start by educating the Sha'b about their rights. Educate the people that you have rights. You are no different in terms of blood and your children and your dignity and your sanctuarity from any other nation. The Muslim blood is not the cheaper blood. And the non-Muslim blood is not the cheaper blood. Humans are humans. And nafsa bin nafs. Allah said in the Quran, a soul for a soul. The criteria is justice. If there is justice, then the souls, all of them, have to be protected. If there is injustice, then there is no justice, no peace. People have.
But I have a question about this, because this is, talking to Democrats around the world, and especially, recently I was in the States, and the people are always taking this position. Yesterday they knew that the Western government was supporting dictators, and it was silence, and now it's as if, okay, we are always the people and what they want, and Shab, you read, they want, so we have to support. That's all fine. What if, when it comes to what is happening today in the West, you look at the situation and you are asking yourself, what do the people want exactly? Because they might be completely silent when it comes to torture, when it comes to the way we deal with immigrants. Some immigrants are treated as criminals in the most democratic societies. This is the reality of it. And then you have people who are in the States or in Europe, they are in jail without, we know that they are innocent, and you talk to the people and you have a sense that there is a lack of awareness. And by the way, it's exactly the same in all the societies. At the end of the day, the people sometimes are dealing or are caring about, some of their interest. And that's normal, but still, when we are dealing here, how can we, so which kind of education, how do we have to spread around to make it, no, that's not possible. You have people being killed in your name and you are silent.
Which kind of education? The human education, I think. I mean, we have to go back to the human values, so that we appreciate every human with a soul, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made that human and gave him or her a soul. And that is the Islamic way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam. We gave the sons of Adam, the children of Adam, dignity. Not just Muslims. Yes, he gave Muslims Jannah, but he gave dignity to everybody. And therefore, we need to tell people in the West and the East, whether we are telling Libyans about the people from African origin, whether we are telling Americans from people with Middle Eastern origin, whether we are telling French from people with North African origin, whether we are, crossing the border to Arabia and the Gulf and on every side, and people from whatever origin. No, we're not supposed to differentiate between people because they look different from who you are. In their basic rights, yes, of course, you feel closer to your people, your country, perhaps your tribe and nation and so on, and color or whatever. You're not supposed to Islamically differentiate and be unfair to others just because they have a different color or a different lineage, even if they were fellow countrymen of yours.
But so listening to you, what really it's the basic of education is about wisdom, caring about people, knowing that the dignity of the people are the same, that there is no hierarchy between black, anyone, or Muslims.
Prophet Muhammad said people are equal like the tooth of the comb. People, like
yes, exactly.
Men, women, Arab, non-Arab, whatever it is.
But this is okay when I sit with you and we are talking with our minds and our intellect. The societies, and even once again in the West, this is what we can see, are driven by emotions, and with emotions you can kill. You are ready to kill. How are you going to deal with this? Because at the end of the day, it has to do with ethics in politics, ethics in government. So how can you deal with this when we have to educate people and we can say that we are lost? The ethical ground is lost. And by the way, not only in politics, you can see that the ethical ground is lost almost everywhere. No ethics in economy, no ethics in the way even we eat, that we are ready to eat, forgetting that the people are killed or are exploited because you are going to eat what you are going to eat. So ethics of consumption is also something that is missing in our awareness. How can we do this? How this ethical ground can change? How can we bring this in the most or the more educated societies today?
No, exactly. I mean, to build on what you're saying, Akhi, like you have to have a cultural change. In order to change politics, you have to change the people. And as your leaders are, as the Prophet ﷺ said. And therefore you have...
So what do you mean? That you mean, for example, that we can confuse between the Americans and the leaders, and for example, they are killing people? So this could be the rhetoric of some people are saying, I'm going to kill the people because they chose this leader.
They don't carry a burden because of their politicians. Every mass of people are not very happy what the politicians say, because the politicians just make it to office and then they do whatever they want.
Just to give you an example, Umberto Eco, the writer, the novelist, was telling me, I don't care about the Italians with Berlusconi, because at the end of the day, they deserve him. They chose him.
Sure, but in order to change whether Berlusconi or any president anywhere who is a tyrant, and most of them are, in order to change that, I think you need to change the people on the cultural level.
Okay.
Talking about Egypt, so I don't talk about other nations. Dictatorship in Egypt is not Hosni Mubarak. Dictatorship is everybody. Dictatorship is on, with all respect, and I'm a proud Egyptian too, but dictatorship is on a family level. When you work in a workplace, there is dictatorship. When you go to a mosque, there is dictatorship. You deal with a policeman, there is and so forth. So I think you need to make a deep cultural change. I think we need to work.
Give me practically, what does it mean?
Practically, I think we need to work on education. I think we need to focus on education, and not just political education, but cultural education. If there is any priority that the Islamic parties, for example in Egypt, that have to stick to and really fight for, it has to be for the education policy. Not for now, not the international policy, and not the issues that have something to do with criminal law. They start with that. And no, before you go to the criminal law and ask for people to be lashed and their hands cut, you have to change the culture. You have to go to schools and educate people.
Do you see this happening now? Do you think that with the Arab awakening, there is something which is a paradigm shift or a change in quality?
Not so far. It's not evident so far, but there is hope for it. There was no hope for it during the during the regimes that have fallen, or the others that are falling on the way. But once they fall, and inshallah they fall one by one, or they reform anyway, to be fair. Once they fall or reform, then you can start to look at education. There is a chance for people to have a better education, to have a more dignified upbringing, so that they know how to deal with animals, they know how to deal, first of all, with human beings, and then they know how to deal with animals, they know how to deal with the disabled, and the minority, and the woman, and the elderly.
It's to reconnect the whole movements with the ethical concerns. This is central.
I think this is number one priority.
Okay. So now, if we come to the West and say we listen to you, 100% we can understand, they were under dictatorship. Now they are moving towards something which is freer society, more democratic procedures. That's fine. When you have people who are educated in the West and still in their name things are done that are completely unethical, with nature, with species that are just the way they are nurtured, with human beings, what can we do? So this is where, for example, as Western Muslims, I'm a Western Muslim, you have been living in the
I'm
West.
Canadian too.
Yes, so you have been, so if there is an ethical responsibility, when the people are educated, you can't come in Canada or come in Europe and say, okay, we have to start again your education. How can we change this cultural reform that you are talking about? What should be done?
I think via the same way, by teaching people how to be human, and therefore how not to have double standards.
What do you mean? What is double standard?
Double standards, for example, when it comes to the environment, the Western double standard is very clear that for us in the West to have a good life, we burn whatever petroleum that we want to burn, we flush our toilet with water that could save how many lives, excuse me for the example, and so forth.
And what about governance?
And governance is a product of that. The governance is a product of the people. And in fact, in the West, there is a chance for changing government when you change the people, because we have a more advanced democracy, I think, in that sense. And therefore, people could change policy with their public opinion. But you need to build that public opinion.
But how can you do this? Because this is the problem. Naomi Klein, in her book on the Chuck Doctrine, what she's saying is that you can just exploit an event as it happened, after September 2001, whatever. Even, you know, now we have, you know, elections in Europe, and we see the politicians using this, and the shift is between wise political discussion to emotional political, you know, diversion.
Yeah.
So how can we do this?
Well, there are a number of things that we can do. First of all, we have to connect people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to their Lord, because we become more human when we are connected to our Creator. So whether we're talking about Muslims or not Muslims, when people start to have more consciousness and being conscious of God and the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we start to feel the other human. We don't think that we are gods and others are just slaves for us or something. So spreading what they call in the West spirituality in the very basic sense, that people start to feel the common spirit that connects everybody, every human. That is very important for an idea. Also education. Again, if we're talking about education in the Middle East being important, education in the West is very important. You have to teach children in the West as much as you teach them how to love their country and how to you know, cooperate and so forth. You also have to teach them about other religions, other minorities, give them an Islam 101, Christianity 101, Buddhism 101, so that they know that this is not an alien religion. These are not people who worship some big black stone in Mecca. These are believers too.
Thank you so much. I think that during this discussion you have been able, once again, to talk, if we start with the end, what you are saying here is mainly from an Islamic viewpoint, connecting ethics with spirituality, which is what you are saying. Spirituality protects the meaning of things and the dignity of human people and human being. And then the second thing has to do with educating the people, not only about themselves, but about others. This is the starting point of getting this awareness that at the end of the day, what is done in your name, you have something which has to do with responsibility. In the Muslim majority countries, you have seen now people saying, we want freedom and dignity, and this has to be heard against all the dictatorships and all the government that were supported by the West or not. And at the same time in the West, there is here a great challenge, which is how do we make it something central in their daily life when they deal with a democratic society, to understand that at the end of the day, they have to be involved in choosing the governments, choosing the people, and being caring about human dignity, when it is not only about citizenship, but about human dignity, immigrants, and international concerns. This is what you were saying, and I think that this connection between the three dimensions is quite important. Well, that's all we have time for. Please let us know your thoughts and views on any of the shows you have seen, and here is the way to contact us.
Islam in Life welcomes your opinion. So please send us your suggestions as well as criticisms on any of the shows you have seen or would like to see. You can do all this by emailing us at islaminlife@presstv.co.uk. You can also be part of our online platform by joining our Facebook page, Islam and Life, on Press TV, where you can share your thoughts with other Islam and Life fans, engage with debates, and view past shows.
Finally, I would like to thank my guest, Dr. Jasser Auda. Thank you so much for being with us. And I hope to see you next week, inshallah.